Hi everyone, my name is Phil and welcome to Phil Does 3D. I'm a multimedia and 3D artist and I stream on Twitch weekdays from 5 PM Pacific time in the United States, 10 AM in Australia and 1 AM in the UK. I hope you guys had a good weekend. I managed to catch up on a few movies over the weekend, which was good. No work. We are working on an Art Deco building interior and exterior that I created back in 2011 using UDK. I'm recreating it now using the Unreal Engine 4.15.1. We're just updating the assets from the original version 6 years ago and changing some of the textures as we bring it into the Unreal Engine. So as we work on an asset, we are importing it into the Unreal Engine from 3D Studio Max. Just wait for Unreal to catch up here on the shader. There we go. As we work on an asset in Max and we bring it into Unreal to get everything ready so we can start rebuilding the level in the Unreal Engine. The Art Deco building is this one here. So this is what we're actually going to be taking into Unreal to do our fly through, our cinematic. I do want to change a few things on this building from the original. I want to update some of the geometry to make it a little higher resolution in parts. I want to change the texture and I want to actually change the roof completely. But before we get to the building, we're working on our assets and I have them all laid out in a line here so I know what I need to work on. The ones in the background are done, the ones in the foreground still have to be done. Last week we were working on one of these stair sections, these railing sections. Now I've been texturing these assets up in Substance Painter, but my preferred 3D paint program is actually Mari by the Foundry. Substance Painter though is good for things like these wooden assets, these railing sections and that type of thing. It does that quite well, so we're using Substance Painter. We'll probably use Mari at some stage as well. Do remember guys, if you have any questions or anything you're not sure about, please feel free to pop into chat and ask me. If I can help, I'm quite happy to try. I have worked in 3D for more than 10 years. I'm an ArchViz artist at the moment. I've worked in games and I've also worked in cinema. So feel free to pop into chat and ask me if you have any questions. It doesn't have to be about Max. If you want to pop in and say hello, that's always cool. If you just want to watch, that's completely fine. Okay, so we're working on this banister section. This is the back banister, the back of the building that is, not the main one in the front. And we were working on these railing sections at the end of the last stream last week. Now I've decided, I think, that I'm going to replace a couple of these here and there with these wrought iron sections to match the one that we're creating here that separates the upper floor from the lower floor. We have some wrought iron in parts of the railing section just to add a bit more interest to the asset. So that's what we're probably going to do with our railings in that back section as well. So having said that, let's go into isolation mode so we don't get confused with everything else in the level. Now I know I don't have to actually place that wrought iron in Max before I export it because I've already imported that wrought iron as a separate object which I can then instance in the engine to save on memory and texture sizes, polygon counts, that type of thing. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be instancing this in the engine and recreating that banister and creating a blueprint from that so we can make a prefab that we can then easily place in our level. But we'll go through that in just a minute. Let's jump into Max here, and now I've got to decide where I want that wrought iron to be. So, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. So I think if we start by maybe removing every second, every two from alternating down. So if I remove this one and this one, this one and this one, this one, and these two. Let's jump into our front viewport here, it'll be easier for us to adjust the size of those railings so that they actually fit properly within that top and bottom rail section. So I think the easiest way to do this is going to be to jump into my modify tab, go into vertex mode, and I'm just going to pull these up a bit. Actually, I want to undo that. I don't want to affect these ones here. I think I just want to affect the very top row. Where am I? Now I've just turned on preserve UV so I can move those verts back within the railing without affecting the rest of my texture. So if you're a max user and you're in edit poly mode here, if you turn on preserve UVs, that won't affect your texture as you move your verts around. Let's do the same thing with this very bottom row. I'm not concerned with it at the bottom here because that's going to be hidden by the stair. Hey Sniper Echo, good to see you. Thank you for hosting the channel as well, I do appreciate it. I hope you had a good weekend. I am keeping well, thank you very much Sniper Echo. I managed to catch up and watch a few movies over the weekend, which is always good. I hope you're well as well, and hope you had a good weekend. I hope you're feeling a bit better. We're just moving our verts so that they actually intersect our stair rail and banister and runner here at the moment. Now I'm just looking at this. I'm just going to undo that for a moment, go back into vertex mode, and I'm actually going to, I think, move all of those down. Oh cool, good to hear Sniper Echo. I'm going to turn preserve UVs off here while I move the bottom section down. So I'm only preserving the UVs on the top section, not on the bottom section. Okay, now again, I'm going to turn preserve UVs on while I move the top verts. And I'm doing that so I don't affect my UV mapping here. Actually, I think what it might be easier for me to do, I'm just thinking instead of doing this one by one, unfortunately I didn't add a modifier to this before I did it. If I'd added a modifier I could have copied that across to the others. So let's just go back. Let's go back. If Max will let me go all the way back to the beginning. There we go. So to save us some work, instead of having to do this, copy the same thing we're doing time and time again, let's use a modifier. So we, instead of working on the base edit poly, let's put another edit poly down. We'll go into vertex mode now. Again, I'm going to turn preserve UVs on. And I'm going to pull that up. Yeah, but we'll pull that up so it intersects our banister. We'll just select the ones we want hidden and pull them down. We're going to turn off preserve UVs now. Select the ones at the base. We're going to pull them down. Again, I'm not worrying about it showing up through the base here, because the base is having stairs, it'll cover anything, so that will be fine. Well, let me undo that. Messed up my UVs for some reason. What are you doing to me, Max? Preserve UVs, okay. You know when you model an object, you set out your UVs that you texture with. So you have your UV shells laid out in your UV editor, whatever that is, whatever program you're using. If you don't turn on preserve UVs and you modify and you start to alter the shape of the object, you're going to start to get your UVs being stretched or altered. Let me just undo that. Preserving, when you turn on preserve UVs, what that does is it makes no difference how you move your verts or your polygons. The UVs are like they're stuck to the in place. So basically you can move your geometry around, but your UVs will stay stuck in place. They won't move. Whereas if you turn it off, which is like a normal UV, when you move your verts, your UVs are going to start stretching. So it just stops your UVs from moving. So that's what preserve UVs does. Yeah, it can be useful for some things, depending on what look you're going for, what geometry you're trying to change. I think what we're going to do for this one though is, instead of actually altering our UVs, we may just do a scale. It may be easier to fix this intersection that we need to make. Now we're still going to have this to contend with this corner up here. So what we're going to do is go into UV mode, into vertex mode, sorry. Select those UVs we need to hide because they're sticking through the top of the banister. And you see I turn preserve UVs on so I can move them down and it's not affecting the rest of my UV map. If I hadn't turned preserve UVs on, that would start skewing my UV map, so my texture would start skewing on an angle. So it's handy for these sort of things where you need to alter the geometry of a mesh, but you want to keep your UVs stuck in place without them skewing or anything. Alright. Now, because we removed a few of these, because I want to place the this wrought ironwork in amongst it to make it look a bit more interesting, we're just changing some of the meshes so that they're a bit different from the original we made. And because there's only another 4 of them, I'm just going to copy these over the top of the ones we've already got so I don't have to mess around with verts again. Again, I'm just shift copying this, so hold down the shift key in Max and drag a copy. We'll move that down in place. Before I move that down, I'm just going to also select these and group them. And I'm doing that so that it'll be easy for me to delete them then when I need to. Shift drag one more copy. And we'll move it down. Because hey, we may as well alter the assets a little bit from the original. We can, we're here, we're doing it, so where we can, where I think it might be improved by changing it up a little bit, that's what I'm going to be doing. So in the original version, this had all railing sections through here, but I think it would look more interesting with a bit of wrought ironwork in places throughout here. And we're going to do that. We're going to create a prefab in Unreal once we've brought this model in. Okay, so let's select our originals now and we can delete them. So that's probably all we really need to do for this rail section. Let's jump into orthographic. We're going to do the same thing with these banister sections as well. I'm going to create a couple that have a couple of banister sections missing so we can put some wrought ironwork in there as well. Just so we've got a bit more variety when we jump into Unreal and start rebuilding our level. We'll have a few different asset pieces that we can use, some that have all railing sections and some that have bits of brought iron in the middle of them, like these ones. Okay, so we know we don't have to worry about the top or the bottom part of the banister because we've already exported a piece that we can place inside the inside of Unreal in our building when we start rebuilding it. We've only got to really worry about the railing here itself. So let's select our pieces here. And again, I'm going to go into isolation mode so we can just concentrate on those pieces itself. And now we can start attaching these pieces together. You see this as an edit mesh. Now I'm worried that that's actually going to be, the verts aren't going to be welded. So I'm going to convert it to an edit poly. Because again, this is a problem I've found with these assets that were created 6 years ago. For some reason now, and when I bring them into Max, I'm finding that the vertices aren't welded. And if they're not welded, you're going to get light leakage in Unreal. It's going to look odd. Your shadows are going to look odd. So I'm going to just make sure they're welded by going into my weld here. And I know if I go up to about 0.49 or 0.48, that tends to weld them together without affecting the geometry. So it's just a very small weld. Just any verts next to each other that should be connected will be connected. And I can check that by going into sub-object mode and making sure that if I select an object, everything is selected there like that. I know they're welded then. Okay, so we've welded that bottom piece that needed to be done. I know these, I'm pretty sure these, oh no, this is a mesh as well. We better check these too. And again, I do it in Edit Poly because Edit Poly will give you many more options to work with your mesh than Edit Mesh mode. Again, we'll go into the weld dialog, and again, we're going to go up to about 0.49 or 0.48 thereabouts. And again, we're just going to double check it by going into sub-object mode. And I know when I select the object, if everything is selected like that, then everything is welded together. Okay, now I know these are going to be polys because I was working on them just a minute ago. So let's attach these pieces together now. Alright, and now we can export our railing here. And again, this is the railing that's in the back of that fly through, the back rail section to the upper floor, not the main railing in the foreground, in the introduction, when you first get into the building. We're going to call this banister back. Banister? No, we won't call it banister. We'll call it stairs back. That'll make more sense for me when I'm rebuilding the actual level in Unreal. And that's why it's important too to make sure that when you're working this way, where you're going to be using a lot of different assets to rebuild the building, make sure they're named in a way that you understand. So they're named correctly, so that you know basically where they're going. This one's called mezzanine rail, so I know this goes at the back of the building on the upper floor. So if you name them correctly, then it's just going to make your life much easier when you have to rebuild it in the Unreal Engine. Let's export this now so we can bring it into Unreal. So export selected. We'll jump into our exports folder. We're going to create a new folder, again to keep everything nice and organized. And we're calling it stairs back. Again, I have painted a UE4 as my preset, and all that is turbo smooth turned on, triangulate turned on, and preserve edge orientation turned on. Let's jump into Unreal and let's import that model. That all looks good. I forgot to do a reset on the X form. I always forget that. Let's do that quickly, and let's also make sure that our axes here is not all flying up on the side but centered to the object. So hierarchy tab, effect pivot, center to object, and utilities tab, reset X form, and reset selected. Now we can collapse our stack. We will export it one more time. Back into Unreal, let's re-import the one we just re-exported. Again, you see I got no error messages or anything this time from Unreal. I do want to swap out some of these textures. Now, again, we have this problem here with our normals. Our normals are flipped, so anytime the object looks inside out like that, the normal's the wrong way around. Again, that's an easy fix in Max or any 3D program. I should have been able to tell from actually looking at it. It looks a bit dark. It should not look quite that dark. So I'm just going to select all of my polys. I'm going to throw down a normal, which will flip the normals, and I'm going to unify the normals as well, just to make sure. Just before I do that, I don't know if I've selected the middle one there or not. I'd forgotten to select that one. I was wondering why it was looking a bit dark. Okay, normals now, everything's light, so as it should be, unify normals. Collapse our stack. And reignite. I don't know if you can tell on stream, but I can tell now with this model because the textures look a lot brighter, they don't look as dark. Generally, if your normals are flipped, your textures are going to look darker than they should. I should have picked that up before I did the export. That's okay, let's re-export it again. Third time's a charm. Okay. Back into Unreal, and Unreal makes it really easy to re-import, so just right click and go re-import. And now if we have a look at our mesh, everything is up the right way around. Doesn't look inside out, it all looks fine. But our textures don't look quite right. Some of these textures we've already created, like this decorative piece here and the railing sections. So let's jump into our materials here and replace the old versions with the ones we've already created. So this one will go here. This one will go here. And this is a new material because it's for the banister and runner here. So let's just save the changes we've made to those two materials. We're going to have to create a new material for the runner and railing. So back into my models here. It's this material here. We haven't used this before because this was a new texture we created in Substance Painter for our railings. So I'm just going to Control-C on that texture sample and Control-V 2 more texture samples in. Now that's called plain wood color. I'm going to have to import the normal and the occlusion, roughness and metallic for that. Where are we? Did I text? I must have texted that up. I'm just looking for the folder that I would have used to do that. What I'm going to do here too is I'm just going to jump quickly into Painter and see what I did there. Wasn't the wood end? No, it wasn't that one. It wasn't the mezzanine rail. Did we texture that up last week? I can't actually remember if we did or not. I don't think we did, actually. I don't think we took that into, that asset into Painter to paint out the wooden texture at the top. Even though the texture doesn't look too bad, I have a feeling we didn't actually texture that up in Substance Painter like we did with the others. Yeah, no, I don't think so either. Now that I look at it, I'm pretty sure we didn't. Again, this texture is a little bit low res. Even for back when it was made, it was okay. Sniper Echo agrees, yeah. Back when in 2011, it was okay for the engines then, but I think it's just a bit too low res now. Yeah, Sniper Echo is saying it looks pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad. We could leave it and jump into Null to create a normal map for it and an occlusion map, or we could take it into Substance Painter and paint up that cherry wood. Let's jump back into Unreal. I'm just going to jump into the actual model itself that we have here in Unreal. And it's not bad. It's usable. It is usable. The only thing I'm a bit iffy about is the wearing on it. If we have a look at our other assets here, we've added some wearing. Maybe this one's a better one to look at. Wearing to the edges of our wood, and it doesn't have any of that detailing in it. Where are we? Any of that edge wear. So we have to decide if it's okay for us to, if we want to add that edge wear in there or not. Just for argument, let's leave it like this for the moment, but let's create a normal map and an occlusion map. The texture itself is okay. I would like a bit of wearing and stuff on it, but we'll leave it like this for now. But we will quickly boot up Null. And from Null, I'll create a normal map and a occlusion map that we can use. And again, Null, K-N-A-L-D, is a great program for creating your normal maps and your occlusion maps. So let's pull in that texture map. I'm just jumping back into Max and back into my material editor here to find the name of that. Just give Max a second. Okay, that will be this texture here. And this texture is called plainwoodcolor.tga. Okay, plain wood color. Now, I do want to, we'll jump quickly into Photoshop. Remember guys, I told you when I work, I generally have about 3 or 4 programs open at a time. So why should today be any different? And the reason I'm doing this is I want to change that target texture to a PNG texture. So I'm going to wait for Photoshop to get its act together. Okay. Plain wood target is the one we're looking for. Deco model. Okay, where are we? And again, I'm using PNG because I would use Targa if I was working on assets that I had to send up to another studio or send to another designer. Because Targa is more of a universal format. It's lossless, so you won't lose any color information. But because we're working with a game engine, I'm going to be working in PNG because the Unreal Engine works with PNG very well. It really makes not much difference when you do the actual initial import into the Unreal Engine, because I think at runtime what it does is it converts all your textures anyway into a format that's optimized for the game engine. So whether you import it with a Targa, a PNG, a TIFF, it makes not much difference to the engine, because the engine will do a compression when it starts to run the game anyway on your asset. But we're going to save this out as a Targa, as a PNG. I'm so used to working with Targa. We'll just leave it called plain wood color, that's fine. Alright, let's close down Photoshop. We shouldn't need Photoshop again. We'll jump back into Gnarled and we'll open up that PNG we just exported. Models, you may be able to hear that. I don't know if you can hear it on my mic, but it's raining pretty heavily here at the moment. Okay, now let's find that plane will be just exported. I didn't export the mesh on its own, so I'm going to just work with the default 3D object here, I think. We may go with a plane though instead of a mesh, instead of a cylinder. It'll just make it easier for me to adjust my normal map. Let's make sure we change our export path to the correct place. UE4 projects, Art Deco building. No, not that one. Models. Art Deco building. That other Art Deco building is where our project for Unreal is stored. Okay, we'll select that folder. Let's pull back on our normal map here all the way. And again, I'm going for this stair step type thing in my normal mapping. I'm just going to pull up a little bit. You don't want to go too high here, particularly this texture is the wood that's on the top of the banister. You're not going to have really deep indentations. It's wood. It's going to be really subtle, so don't go too heavy here with the normal map. So you wouldn't want to do that. Again too, if you take your normal mapping too high, everything's going to start to look like it's wrapped in plastic. You don't want that look. So we're going to pull it right back. We're going to start at 0 and I'm just going to start pulling it in just until I get a bit of detail showing up. I know it's harder to see, but you see the normal map is really, really fine. There's not a lot to it. Just to give the illusion of a bit of texture on the wood. Okay, let's update our integrator. And that will create our height map, our derivative, ambient occlusion, concavity and convexity. I'm going to pull up on the ambient occlusion though a bit, just so I can see it a little bit more here. That won't affect our normal map or anything else, it only affects the ambient occlusion. We've set our path. We're going to make sure that we're exporting height, normal, ambient occlusion. I'm exporting convexity. I'm not going to use it though, but it can be useful to do a metallic. The olden days specular, but metallic and roughness these days is what it's called. Let's export those. Again, I'm going to make sure that we're doing PNG, and we are good. Okay, now we can jump back into Unreal. We can import those texture maps we just exported. Plain wood, and we want the normal map, and we want the occlusion map, ambient occlusion. All right, now we can set up our shader. So we're going to select our normal map and pop it into this texture slot. We're going to select our ambient occlusion map and we're going to pop it into this one. And pipe the ambient occlusion into ambient occlusion and normal into normal. And save our shader. Alright. now we can, I'm just going to jump back into the asset here and check that. And again, you see my normal map here is it's looking too harsh. I need to pull it back even more. In some light it's fine, but when we get it actually in the light itself, it's just a bit too harsh. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into Gnarled, back into my normal map settings here. I'm going to pull right back on the large detail, right back on the medium detail. Even, I'm just going to pull up a little bit on the fine detail, the extra fine detail, but what I'm going to do is pull back on the intensity here. So instead of setting it to 100, I'm going to take it back to around about 40. So it's really subtle. Update the integrator again. I'm going to do an export again. Back into Unreal, and I'm only going to re-import the normal map. I want the ambient occlusion to stay as it is. Okay, that's much better. Much more subtle. We don't want really heavy normal mapping on these banister railings. Just a subtle normal map. Alright, let's create a blueprint now, I think. So let's just jump out into a part of the level here that's free and drag in our banister section. I know that's the inside there, but what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to rotate it so we get a better look at it, 90 degrees. And let's start adding a bit more wrought iron detailing in here in the sections that are missing. So let's find our wrought iron. Where is it? Here we are. We'll drag that in, drag it up. Again, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to jump into my top viewport, I think, for a minute. Where are we? Here we are. We're going to drag that into place. I may start at the top and work my way back, I think. Okay, we'll jump back into our orthographic. Now, we can see here that our asset is a little bit too small, but we want to try and save on poly counts and texture memory, so we don't want to pull in another asset that will work. We can alter this one to work by just using the scale, but non-uniformly scaling it. Just in one direction, not in all. And I want to scale it up enough that it fits in that section without popping out the top there. It's probably a bit too much. I'm going to turn off grid snapping and angle snapping in here so I can get a bit more control over my scale. Alright. This is an odd object to try and add these two. When we're working with square sections like this, it's not a problem. But because we're working with a piece of railing here that's on an angle, we have two options. We can either create another mesh in Max that will angle in, or we can leave it so it's a little shorter. I'm trying to work out what would be better. See, because if I pull that up to actually fit in here, we have this problem of it intersecting the top of our geometry here. We can't have that, so I'm just trying to work out what will be the better option. I'm going to pull it in until it just doesn't intersect the top, and I'm going to check it how that looks in a side view here. Yeah, that's really a bit too far down. That looks odd.